What I'd like people to know is don't think you're safe. We really thought we were in this small town. All these people have no jobs now.
For decades, battery manufacturing supported the communities of Fennimore and Portage, Wisconsin. But suddenly, last year, everything changed.
Energizer says it plans to close down its plants in Portage and Fennimore in the next year or two, affecting nearly 600 workers.
Energizer is moving its jobs here overseas, to Singapore and the UK, and to a non-union factory in North Carolina. But the 600 union workers at these two factories aren't the only ones in trouble. America has lost 35% of our manufacturing jobs in the last 40 years. The question is, what happened?
They knew what they were doing from the beginning. They had a plan.
Why have jobs in towns like Fennimore and Portage, places that used to be the bedrock of American manufacturing, disappeared? To find an answer, we went to Wisconsin. What we learned wasn't just about Energizer. It was also about how companies buy their competitors to shift profits to executives at workers' expense. How politicians who claim to care about American jobs let them get away with it, and what we can do to stop it.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning. I have been in that facility for 43 years. I've been through every change in that plant.
Chris has worked in the battery plant since she was 18. Her husband and her sister also worked there. 4 years ago, new ownership suddenly took over their factory.
Energizer will pay $2 billion in cash to take over Spectrum's battery and lighting assets.
Chris says right away, she could tell something was up.
Well, when we went into negotiations, they wanted a 3-year contract. That tipped me off right there. Rayovac always wanted a 5-year. To me, that suggested we're going to be gone. They bought us to move us.
By buying Rayovac, Energizer locked up 40% of the consumer battery market in the US. Combined with Duracell, they control 80%. That's called a duopoly. When only two major companies control a market, it's much easier for them to coordinate to increase prices or to reduce labor costs. Sure enough, over the next 3 years, Energizer raised prices across 85% of its products. Then came the announcement in Wisconsin.
2 weeks before Christmas. What a time to tell us. When we got called into a mass meeting, we had really no forewarning. They just took us upstairs, sat us down, and read a statement telling us the plant's going to close in 18 to 24 months, and out the door they went. We couldn't ask no questions, no nothing. We were all stunned.
It made me sick to my stomach. This has been my life for 11 years. Where am I going to find another job? Are we going to start having to find daycare?
Sarah works at Energizer's other Wisconsin plant, making hearing aid batteries. She works the night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., then gets her daughters ready for school.
I go out and I do DoorDash or Instacart or Spark delivery for Walmart until they come home from school.
So when do you sleep?
A few hours after work and a few hours before work.
Sarah's oldest daughter and son-in-law work at the plant too. She says their union wages are good, and Energizer could not accept that.
I do think that Energizer purchased our plant and the Fennimore plant with the intent of eventually shutting us down. We're union, they can't just cut our wages. So they're outsourcing our jobs to non-union plants where they can pay them a lot less.
I'd never been involved in any political thing ever, but once they announced this, I really was angry. With our union reps from both Portage and Fennimore, we did a lot of campaigning in front of our buildings out on the street, handing out flyers. We wrote to our congressman, somebody's got to do something.
It seems to me that when seeking support from the government, these billion-dollar corporations talk up their American facilities and workers. All the while, some of these corporations, like Energizer, are making plans to move a union facility to a non-union state or a foreign country.
Rayovac, that was ubiquitous in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin began to look more closely at what Energizer had done. She realized it was actually regulators who had allowed it to happen. at the Federal Trade Commission in Washington.
Mergers have to be approved by the government. This merger was looked at by the Federal Trade Commission, and it looks like it was simply rubber stamped.
The FTC has the power to challenge mergers, but when Energizer told the FTC in 2018 that it was buying Spectrum, the FTC did nothing.
It's kind of shocking that a merger like this is not challenged. The layoffs that are expected from the Energizer Spectrum merger are a completely natural consequence of the merger that took place in 2018. When shareholders go down the merger path, they're trying to cut costs. And at the end of the day, labor is a cost.
Companies often promise that consolidation will preserve existing jobs, or even that it will create more jobs. But without fail, the opposite happens.
There was the merger of T-Mobile and Sprint in 2020. You had executives saying that this was going to result in 11,000 new jobs from day one. And what do you see in the aftermath of that merger? 8,000 jobs were cut. The CEO of T-Mobile walked away with $137 million. It's almost as if that's a reward for laying off workers.
Since Energizer acquired Spectrum, its CEO pay has tripled to $9 million a year.
We have been aware of the hefty bonuses that the executives and all the higher ups have received since the merger, and the bonuses they earn quarterly compared to what we're getting.
How would you compare the two?
Well, we get nothing, and they're getting millions.
Energizer reported a profit of $1.1 billion in 2022 and paid shareholders $93 million in dividends. Big payouts to executives and shareholders are part of why the number of mergers has dramatically increased in recent decades. The other reason is that business-friendly regulators stopped challenging them.
Politicians have aggressively pursued a policy of globalization, moving our jobs, our wealth, and our factories overseas.
From his first campaign, Donald Trump talked a lot about globalization and free trade agreements harming U.S. manufacturing. He's right that cheap non-union labor has been a boon for companies. But as president, Trump's actions tell a different story. It was actually the Trump administration that let Energizer get away with killing these 600 union jobs. At the time of the merger, the acting chairwoman of the FTC, chosen by President Trump, was opposed to government regulation and believed antitrust enforcement put an undue burden on corporations.
It just feels like during the Trump administration that this was rubber stamped. Without any conditions attached, they said just go for it.
Even the companies expected more from the FTC. Spectrum's lawyer admitted it had been prepared for a long investigation, but was pleasantly surprised that one never happened.
This is part of a trend of neglect of the antitrust laws. There were over 2,200 mergers that were reported to the federal agencies in 2018. Of those, only 22 were challenged by the Federal Trade Commission. Shockingly, the merger guidelines have never made a reference to labor markets. They've never considered the impacts of mergers on workers.
For the first time in decades, this is changing. When President Biden took office, he appointed reformer Lina Khan to lead the FTC. In July, Khan's FTC released a draft of new guidelines for policing mergers. For the first time, the guidelines say regulators should look at the potential effects of a merger on workers and jobs.
One of the big advantages to the new merger guidelines is that it doesn't treat workers as a tradable efficiency. That is a huge change in the law, and I think that they're going to inform a sea change in the way that the federal agencies view the impact of market consolidation on workers.
I am pressing the Federal Trade Commission to go back and look at the decision-making process to give the green light to this merger. What if those guidelines were in effect? Would you have made the same decision?
Layoffs at Energizer are expected to begin this month and will continue until every job is eliminated by June of next year.
I think we're all just kind of hanging in there right now. We don't know what to expect. There's not a lot of jobs in this area.
Tim, one of Chris's colleagues, still works at the plant. Before the closure announcement, he and his wife were approved for a first-time mortgage loan.
We went and got the house. We were all excited, put the offer in, and then they come back and tell us that with my employment being terminated, that we no longer qualify for any sort of loan until my employment is done. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Right now, it's just keep going to work while the doors are open and see what happens and see where life takes us now. I feel like you're just pieces on a chessboard at this point.